The envelope hit the mahogany desk with the weight of a death sentence. $50,000 in unmarked bills, the price of silence, the cost of making a mistake disappear. Elena Morrison's hands trembled as she stared at the money, then at the man who had once whispered promises against her skin in the darkness. Alexander Hunt, billionaire, shark, the man who built empires while others slept, stood behind his desk like a king delivering judgment. "Take it," he said, his voice stripped of every tender word he'd ever spoken to her. "Fix this. My wedding is in 3 weeks, and I will not let your carelessness destroy everything I've built." Elena's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, protecting the life growing there, the life he was calling a mistake. "And if I don't?" she whispered. Alexander's smile was colder than winter. "Then I'll make sure your mother loses her teaching position. Your sister's scholarship? Gone. Your brother's construction company? I know every contractor in this city. One phone call and his business dies. You'll take the money, Elena, or I'll burn your entire family to the ground." The woman standing in that office died that night, but the woman who would rise from her ashes, she would become his worst nightmare. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all began. Hi, my beautiful family. Today, I want to share a truly beautiful story with you. If you like these kinds of stories, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a heartbeat. Also, we are so curious, where in the world are you watching from today? Now, let's begin this story with love. Elena Morrison believed in the goodness of people. It was both her greatest strength and her fatal flaw. At 27, she had worked her way from poverty to become the executive assistant to Alexander Hunt, CEO of Hunt Global Enterprises. It wasn't glamorous. She scheduled his meetings, managed his impossible demands, learned to read his moods before he walked through the door. But she was good at it. Exceptional, even. Alexander noticed. It started innocently. A compliment on her efficiency, a grateful smile when she solved a problem no one else could handle. Late nights working side by side when the office emptied and the city below them transformed into a sea of lights. Then one night, working on a merger that would make or break his company, Alexander looked up from his laptop and said, "I don't know what I'd do without you." The way he said it made Elena's heart stutter. Their affair began like a wildfire, sudden, consuming, impossible to control. Alexander was engaged to Victoria Sterling, daughter of the Sterling banking dynasty. Their wedding was business, he told Elena, a merger of families, not hearts. He didn't love Victoria. He couldn't love anyone until he met Elena. She believed him. For 6 months, they existed in stolen moments. Hotel rooms where no one knew their names, his penthouse when Victoria traveled, whispered phone calls in the middle of the night. Alexander made her feel seen in ways she'd never experienced. He memorized the way she took her coffee. He listened when she talked about her family's struggles. He traced constellations on her skin and called her her North Star. "When the merger is finalized," he promised one night, holding her face in his hands, "I'll end things with Victoria. I'll choose you, Elena, I swear it." She believed that too. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. Elena stared at it in the bathroom of her small apartment, her entire world shifting on its axis. She was terrified, exhilarated, completely unprepared. But underneath the fear was something else, a fierce protective love for the tiny cluster of cells growing there. She rehearsed the conversation 100 times, imagined Alexander's initial shock giving way to joy, pictured him calling off the wedding, choosing their child, choosing her. They would face the scandal together. It would be difficult, but they would survive because they had each other. When she finally told him, standing in his office after everyone else had left, Alexander went perfectly still. "You're sure?" His voice was carefully neutral. "I took 3 tests. I'm 8 weeks along." The silence stretched like pulled taffy. Then Alexander opened his desk drawer and pulled out a checkbook. Elena watched, confused, as he wrote with decisive strokes. He tore off the check and slid it across the desk. $50,000. "This should cover everything," he said. "I have a clinic that's discreet. They can see you tomorrow." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. "What are you talking about?" "Elena, be realistic." Alexander's tone was the same he used in board meetings. I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Victoria's family controls the votes I need to finalize the merger. If word gets out about you, about this," he gestured vaguely at her stomach, "everything collapses. The wedding, the merger, the company. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "You're asking me to kill our baby." "I'm asking you to be practical. You're 27. There will be other chances for children when the timing is better." "When the timing is better for you," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I'm keeping this baby, Alexander." His expression hardened into something he'd never seen directed at her before. It was the look he gave competitors before destroying them. "If you keep this child, if anyone discovers what happened between us, I will make sure your family suffers. Your mother loves that teaching position, doesn't she? 22 years building her reputation. I sit on the school board. One word from me about budget cuts, and she's unemployed. You wouldn't. Your sister's medical school scholarship comes from the Hunt Foundation. Your brother's construction company bids on city contracts I influence. Elena, I've given you an incredibly generous solution. Don't force me to be the villain." Elena left his office with the check burning in her hand like evidence of her own stupidity. She'd been so certain of his love, so convinced he would choose her. Instead, he'd reduced their child to a problem requiring a financial solution. She went home in a daze, packed her entire life into 3 suitcases, withdrew every dollar from her savings account, $3,847 that represented years of living frugally. Combined with Alexander's blood money, she had enough to disappear. Her phone buzzed constantly, her mother asking about Sunday dinner, her sister sharing funny medical school stories, her brother sending photos of his daughter's birthday party. Elena stared at their messages and couldn't respond, because how do you tell your family you're running away to protect them from a man who holds their futures hostage? She booked a flight to Portland under her grandmother's maiden name, no connections to Alexander, no trail to follow. At 3 a.m., someone knocked on her door. Through the peephole, Elena saw Marcus Sterling, Victoria's older brother, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. Every instinct screamed danger. She didn't open the door. "It's 3 a.m. Leave or I'm calling the police." "Elena, don't be dramatic. I just want to talk about the situation. There's nothing to discuss." The doorknob rattled. Then she heard metal scraping. He was picking the lock. Elena ran for her bedroom, fumbling for her phone. The apartment door burst open before she could dial 911. Marcus filled the doorway with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced consequences. "Victoria's wedding cannot have complications," he said conversationally. "Our family has invested considerable resources in Alexander. You and your pregnancy represent a problem." "Get out!" Elena's voice came out thin and terrified. "Alexander gave you money. That was generous. But you're still here, still pregnant. That needs to change." Elena tried to run, tried to lock herself in the bathroom, but Marcus was faster, stronger. She felt his hands grab her arms, felt herself thrown backward, felt the sharp edge of her coffee table connect with her skull with a sickening crack. The world tilted sideways. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard was Marcus saying, "Fall down the stairs. Tell them you fell down the stairs." Then nothing. She woke in a hospital room with fluorescent lights burning into her eyes and a kind nurse checking her vitals. Elena said she fell, kept saying it even as the ER doctor noted the defensive bruises on her arms, even as they did an ultrasound and confirmed the baby was miraculously okay despite the head trauma. When they released her the next morning with a concussion diagnosis and strict orders to follow up, Elena went directly to the airport. She boarded her flight with nothing but her suitcases and Alexander's blood money, and a determination to disappear so completely that neither Alexander nor the Sterling family would ever find her. The woman who loved Alexander Hunt died in that apartment. The woman who boarded the plane to Portland was someone new, someone harder, someone who would do whatever it took to protect her child. If this story is already touching your heart, imagine how many others need to hear it. A simple like and subscribe helps us reach souls who need this message. Don't let this story end with you. Pass it forward. Portland was rain and gray skies and blessed anonymity. Elena found a room in a boarding house where the landlady didn't ask questions. She took a job waiting tables at an all-night diner, working split shifts that left her feet aching and her back screaming. The pregnancy made everything harder. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that settled into her bones, fear that never quite left. But she survived. At 5 months pregnant, a letter found her through a chain of law offices that had been searching for 6 years. Dear Miss Morrison, we represent the estate of Jonathan Thorne. We've been instructed to locate Elena Marie Morrison, daughter of Catherine Morrison. After an extensive search, we believe we have found you. Mr. Thorne was your biological father. He passed away 4 years ago, leaving instructions that his daughter be found and given her inheritance regardless of how long the search took. Elena read the letter 3 times before the words made sense. Her father, the man who abandoned her mother before Elena was born, had left her money, $8 million, and a 5% stake in Thorne Capital Ventures, his venture capital firm. For most people, $8 million would mean security, retirement, a life of comfortable ease. Elena Morrison was not most people. She'd spent 6 months as Alexander Hunt's executive assistant, 6 months watching him build an empire through calculated aggression and strategic vision. She'd learned more about venture capital and corporate warfare than she realized, learned by watching, by listening, by making herself invaluable. Now she had capital. What she needed was knowledge. Elena spent the last months of her pregnancy educating herself. She bought textbooks on finance and investment strategy, enrolled in online courses, filled notebooks with market analyses, taught herself to read balance sheets and evaluate startup potential with the same intensity she once brought to memorizing Alexander's schedule. When her daughter was born on a cold February morning, Elena held the tiny, perfect human she'd created and whispered a promise. I'm going to build you a world where you never have to be afraid, where no man can ever threaten your future. She named her daughter Isabella, Bella for short. When Bella was 3 months old, Elena made her first investment. The board members at Thorne Capital, old men who had been mismanaging her father's legacy, ignored a biotech startup founded by 3 women without Ivy League credentials. They dismissed the company in their quarterly meeting without even reading the full proposal. Elena read it, saw what they couldn't: revolutionary cardiac diagnostic technology that could save lives. Founders who were brilliant despite being systematically overlooked. She used $4 million to buy a substantial stake, a terrifying gamble that could wipe out half her inheritance. 18 months later, the biotech company was acquired for $200 million. Elena's stake was worth $32 million. But money alone didn't make her powerful. What came next required something harder: stepping out of hiding and claiming her father's name. At 29 years old, with a toddler at home, Elena walked into Thorne Capital Ventures and demanded a board seat. She faced down the old men who had been failing for years and systematically exposed their incompetence with surgical precision. The battle for control took a year. Elena built coalitions, recruited overlooked talent, positioned herself as someone with vision rather than just an inheritance. By the time Bella turned 3, Elena had tripled the firm's assets under management and established herself as one of the most successful venture capitalists in her sector. But every investment was an act of revenge. Every hire of an overlooked founder was payback against a world that tried to destroy her. Every success was proof that Alexander Hunt had been catastrophically wrong about her worth. I see you all watching, but only a few have subscribed. If you're feeling this story, if it's stirring something inside you, please don't just watch, subscribe. Be part of this family. We're building something beautiful together, and we need you. The corporate summit in Chicago was Elena's territory now. She was keynoting. Her presentation on ethical venture capitalism had been requested specifically by the organizers. She stood backstage, mentally reviewing her slides, when someone said, "After Miss Thorne, we have Alexander Hunt from Hunt Global Enterprises." Elena's blood turned to ice. "Did you say Alexander Hunt?" The organizer nodded, scrolling through his tablet. "Yes, he's speaking about traditional merger strategies. Why? Do you two know each other?" "We did, a long time ago." Elena had avoided Alexander successfully for 4 years. Different cities, different social circles, different professional orbits. She'd rebuilt her life specifically to never cross paths with him again. Now he was one presentation away. She could leave, make an excuse, protect the careful distance she'd maintained. Or she could walk onto that stage and show him exactly what happened when you underestimated someone. Elena chose the stage. Her presentation was flawless. She dismantled traditional investment models with sharp intelligence, backed her theories with concrete data, commanded the room with the authority of someone who had earned every inch of respect. She never looked at the audience, never searched for Alexander's face, just delivered her message with precision and walked off to thunderous applause. Backstage, her assistant appeared looking flustered. "Miss Thorne, there's someone asking to see you. He says it's urgent and personal. Alexander Hunt?" Elena's heart hammered. "I told you I'm unavailable." "He's quite insistent. He's saying he knows you'll want to hear what he has to say." "I don't care if he's insistent. The answer is no." Elena gathered her materials and headed for the exit, her security escort flanking her. She was almost to her car when she heard him. "Elena!" She should have kept walking, but 4 years of fury made her turn. Alexander looked older, tired. The arrogant confidence she remembered had eroded into something desperate. He stopped a respectful distance away, held up his hands in surrender. "I just want to talk, please. We have nothing to discuss. I saw you up there, saw what you've become. Elena, I had no idea." "No idea what? That I was capable of surviving you? That I could build something without you? I'm not interested in your apology or your amazement, Alexander. I moved on. You should too." She turned to leave again, and that's when Bella came running from the car where Elena's nanny waited. 4 years old, dark curls bouncing, completely unaware of the minefield she was entering. "Mommy, Mommy, can we get ice cream before we go home?" Bella crashed into Elena's legs, wrapping her small arms around her mother. Elena picked her up instinctively, positioning her body between her daughter and Alexander. But Alexander was staring at Bella with an expression Elena had never seen. Complete devastation mixed with wonder. Recognition. "She has my eyes," he whispered. "She has her eyes," Elena corrected coldly. "This is Isabella, my daughter, who has nothing to do with you." Bella, curious about the strange man, tilted her head. "Hi, I'm Bella. I'm 4 years old. Who are you?" Before Elena could intervene, Alexander answered, his voice breaking. I'm nobody important. But it's very nice to meet you, Bella." "We need to go," Elena said firmly. "Bella, say goodbye." "Bye, nobody important," Bella waved cheerfully as Elena carried her to the car. Through the rear window, Elena watched Alexander standing alone in that parking garage, watching them drive away. She saw him drop to his knees, saw his shoulders shake. "Good," she thought viciously, "let him feel a fraction of what he put me through." But that night, after Bella was asleep, Elena found herself standing at her window, thinking about the look on Alexander's face when he saw their daughter for the first time. It wasn't satisfaction, she felt. It was complicated, painful, unresolved, and she hated that she felt anything at all. "I'm pouring my heart into this story for you, spending hours crafting every word. All I ask is 2 seconds. Hit that like button, tap subscribe. It's free for you, but it means the world to me. Help me keep bringing you these stories." Alexander's investigation into Elena's life was thorough, obsessive, and ultimately futile. He hired the best private investigators money could buy. They delivered a file that explained her transformation, the inheritance from her biological father, the strategic investments, the battle for control of Thorne Capital. They documented her successes with clinical precision, but they couldn't explain the woman she'd become, the fierce protectiveness, the steel beneath the elegance, the way she looked at him now like he was something toxic she'd finally learned to avoid. What the file did contain, buried in medical records he shouldn't have been able to access, was a hospital admission 4 years ago, head trauma, defensive wounds, a patient who left against medical advice while pregnant. Alexander read the report in his office at midnight, the words blurring as understanding crashed over him. Marcus. He called Marcus Sterling at 2 a.m., not caring that he would wake him. "Did you do to her?" Alexander demanded without preamble. 4 years ago, what did you do to Elena?" Marcus's voice was sleep-rough, but unconcerned. "I protected Victoria's wedding. You wanted the problem handled. I handled it. You assaulted a pregnant woman. You put her in the hospital. And she left quietly afterward, didn't she? My methods were efficient. You got your merger, your marriage, your empire. Don't develop a conscience now that the girl turned out successful." Alexander hung up and vomited into his office trash can. He'd told himself he was protecting his business, that he was being practical, that Elena made her own choices about what happened after. But Marcus was right. Alexander created the conditions where violence became inevitable. He'd threatened Elena's family, made it clear she had to disappear, painted her as an obstacle that needed eliminating. His marriage to Victoria was exactly what he'd built it to be, transactional, hollow, polite. They lived in separate wings of their penthouse, attended charity events where they smiled for cameras, never discussed anything meaningful. When Alexander filed for divorce 3 months after seeing Elena and Bella, Victoria's response was clinical. "This is about the child. It's about everything. I built my life on cruelty, and I'm finally facing consequences." "Consequences?" Victoria laughed without humor. "You think losing me is consequences? You don't even know what's coming." Victoria's family pulled their board support within a week. Alexander's company, already vulnerable from market pressure, started hemorrhaging value. Investors fled. Partners backed out of deals. The empire he'd built began collapsing with terrifying speed. And behind every disaster, every strategic withdrawal of support, Alexander found evidence of Elena's involvement. She'd quietly acquired his largest competitor 6 months earlier, merged it with 2 other companies to create an entity that now controlled more market share than Alexander's company ever had. She'd been planning his destruction for years, positioning her pieces with perfect patience. He was losing everything, and he deserved it. But Elena's revenge went further than business. Alexander discovered she'd funded a scholarship program specifically for children of single mothers who faced workplace discrimination. She'd launched a legal fund to help women fight against powerful men who used their positions to coerce or threaten. She was turning his cruelty into a movement, making his worst behavior the foundation for helping others. It was devastating, brilliant, absolutely unforgivable that she had to do any of it. Alexander's lawyer advised bankruptcy. His accountant suggested liquidation. His remaining board members resigned one by one until he was presiding over a company that existed only on paper. On his last day as CEO, Alexander cleaned out his office alone, left his security badge on the desk, walked out into a parking garage that looked exactly like the one where he'd first seen Bella. He had nothing left except regrets and the knowledge that he'd destroyed the only woman he'd ever actually loved. My beautiful family, if this story is touching your soul, if you're invested in what happens next, please subscribe. So many watch but forget to join our family. Don't be a ghost in the shadows. Step into the light with us. Like, subscribe, and let's grow together.
Alexander hit bottom at Bella's preschool. He told himself he just wanted to see her, to understand the child he'd rejected. He wasn't going to approach her, wasn't going to cause problems. He was lying to himself. He rented a car Elena wouldn't recognize and parked across from Little Learners Academy every afternoon for a week. Watched parents collect their children, searched for Bella's distinctive curls. Then he saw her, skipping out of the building in a purple dress, her laughter carrying across the afternoon air. She was holding hands with Elena's nanny, chattering animatedly about something that required elaborate hand gestures. She was perfect, real, his daughter. The daughter he'd told Elena to abort. Alexander returned every day, learned Bella's schedule, knew she had dance on Tuesdays, knew her favorite friends' names from listening to other parents. He never approached, just watched, collected pieces of her life like stolen treasures. Until the day the nanny didn't come. Bella waited on the school steps while teachers made worried phone calls. Alexander watched her trying to be brave, saw her small shoulders stay straight even as her eyes kept scanning for someone familiar. After 20 minutes, he found himself getting out of his car. The teacher's body language shifted to protective mode when she saw an unfamiliar man approaching. Alexander stopped several feet away, hands visible. "I couldn't help noticing she's been waiting a while. Is everything okay?" "Her regular pickup was delayed," the teacher said carefully. "Someone is on the way." Alexander started to leave. Then Bella looked directly at him, and something in her face stopped him cold. "Hey there," Alexander said gently, crouching to her level. "I know waiting is hard, but I bet your mom is coming as fast as she can." "My nanny got sick," Bella said, her voice trembling. "Mama's in a meeting. I'm supposed to be patient, but I don't like being last." "Being patient is tough, but you're doing great. Not everyone can wait this calmly when they're worried. That takes real strength." Bella studied him with intensity that reminded him of Elena. "Do you have kids?" "No," Alexander said, the lie tasting like ash. "But I remember being a kid and waiting for my mom. It felt like forever." Before Bella could respond, a car screeched into the parking lot, and Elena emerged, panicked and disheveled. Then she saw Alexander crouched near her daughter. Her face transformed into pure fury mixed with primal terror. "I was just leaving," Alexander said quickly, hands raised in surrender. Elena wasn't listening. She pushed past him to gather Bella into her arms with fierce protectiveness. "Are you okay? Did he touch you? Did he say anything uncomfortable?" "He was nice, Mama. He told me I was being patient. Why are you so scared?" Elena's eyes never left Alexander's face, promising consequences he couldn't imagine. She signed something to the teacher, thanked her with forced politeness, then guided Bella toward her car while keeping her body between her daughter and Alexander. "Elena, please, I wasn't going to—" "Stay away from us," Elena hissed. "Stay away from her school, her dance class, everywhere she exists. If I see you near my daughter again, I'll have you arrested." The restraining order arrived the next day. Temporary, with a hearing scheduled for 2 weeks out. Alexander didn't contest it. How could he? He'd been surveilling his daughter's preschool. He stopped going to the school, stopped driving past Elena's building, started drinking too much and showing up late to the consulting job he'd lost after losing his company. His brother called from Seattle. They talked for hours. At the end, his brother said gently, "Maybe you need to leave the city, Chris. Maybe your presence here is punishment for them, not penance for you." The words hit like a physical blow. Alexander realized he'd convinced himself that suffering near Elena and Bella was appropriate punishment, but really, he was just making himself a constant threat they had to guard against. Leaving would be the first genuinely selfless thing he'd done in years. On his last night in the city, Alexander drove past Elena's building one final time, didn't stop or slow down, just whispered something that might have been goodbye or apology toward the illuminated windows. Then he drove east toward a city where nobody knew his history, where he could be anonymous and irrelevant and no longer a danger to the people he'd failed. It wasn't redemption. It was the only thing he had left to offer. We're almost at the end, and I have to ask, have you subscribed yet? If this story made you feel anything, if you've been on this journey with me, please don't leave without subscribing. It takes 1 second but supports hours of my work. I believe in you. Show me you believe in this too.
Bella collapsed during her dance recital 18 months after Alexander left the city. Elena watched her daughter crumple mid-pirouette, watched her small body hit the stage floor, felt her heart stop before her mind could process what was happening. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but when the doctors at Children's Hospital started asking about family genetic conditions and hereditary disorders, Elena realized with sickening clarity that she only knew half of her daughter's medical story. She needed Alexander's medical history. After everything, after the revenge, the restraining order, forcing him out of the city, she needed him. Elena's hands shook as she dialed the number his brother had given her for emergencies. "It's Bella," she said when Alexander answered. "She collapsed. She's in pediatric intensive care. The doctors need your complete medical history immediately." The silence stretched, then, "What hospital? I'm leaving now." "Alexander, you don't have to. Send me your email. I'll have my medical file there in an hour. And Elena, I'm getting on a plane. Not to intrude, just to be nearby if the doctors need more information." His medical records arrived 40 minutes later, comprehensive documentation of his family's cardiac conditions, including the sudden death of his grandfather from an undiagnosed heart defect. The attending physician reviewed the information with visible relief. "This helps us identify the specific condition. It's treatable with surgery, but we needed to know the genetic pattern." Elena texted Alexander an update. Instead of acknowledgement, her phone rang. "I found the top pediatric cardiac surgeon in the country," Alexander said without preamble. "Dr. Amelia Reeves. She's in Boston, but willing to fly out tomorrow if you authorize it. She pioneered the specific technique Bella needs." "How did you even—" "I called everyone I used to know with medical connections. I explained the situation and asked who was the absolute best. Her name came up 3 times. "Okay," Elena heard herself say, "have her assistant contact the hospital. And Elena, thank you for calling me. I know what it cost you." Alexander arrived 6 hours later, texted to say he was in the waiting room. Elena found him after midnight, sitting alone with his head in his hands. "She's stable," Elena said quietly. "Surgery is scheduled for 2 days from now." Alexander stood but made no move to approach. "Can I see her? Just for a minute. I won't wake her." Elena should have said no. But standing in that waiting room, watching Alexander barely hold himself together, she couldn't deny him this. 5 minutes. If she wakes up, you leave immediately." Alexander approached Bella's bedside with cautious reverence, looked at their daughter for a long moment, taking in her small face and the machines tracking her vital signs. "She's so small, so perfect. How do you survive loving someone this much?" "You learn to live with terror," Elena said. "You accept that loving someone means being perpetually vulnerable, and you accept that risk because the alternative is worse." When the 5 minutes ended, Alexander thanked Elena with his eyes and left without protest. The surgery lasted 7 hours. Alexander never left the waiting room despite Elena telling him repeatedly he didn't need to stay. Elena's mother arrived mid-morning. She looked at Alexander with undisguised suspicion, but when she returned from getting coffee, she silently handed him a cup. The surgeon finally emerged in late afternoon. "The procedure went well. The defect is corrected. Bella should be able to live a completely normal life." Over the following days, as Bella recovered, Alexander maintained respectful distance while remaining available. He stayed at a hotel, came during visiting hours but left promptly when asked, brought food for the nursing staff. He never tried to introduce himself to Bella as anything other than someone who was helping. When Bella woke fully and noticed him, she said with direct curiosity, "You're the nice man from my school, the one who said I was being patient." "That's right," Alexander said carefully. "I came to check how you're doing." "My heart was broken," Bella announced matter-of-factly, "but the doctors fixed it." "I'm glad they could help you. You're very brave." "I wasn't brave during surgery," Bella said seriously. "I was asleep. Being brave is when you're scared, but you do the thing anyway." After Bella fell asleep, Alexander approached Elena. "I should head back east soon, but I wanted to leave my contact information, not to push for involvement, just so you can reach me if there's another medical emergency." Elena considered refusing, but she couldn't deny that having access to his medical information might be important. "Okay, leave it with the hospital administrators. And, Elena, thank you for calling me, for letting me see her, for everything." The next morning, Alexander had checked out and returned to wherever he now lived. But something had shifted, something Elena couldn't quite name. It wasn't forgiveness, not even close. But maybe it was the first recognition that people could change, that someday there might be space for Alexander to know his daughter in ways that didn't damage anyone. It was just a possibility, fragile and uncertain, but it was something. 6 months after Bella's surgery, Alexander's name appeared on Elena's phone screen on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Elena stared at the incoming call for 3 rings before answering. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Alexander said quickly. Bella's 6-month cardiac follow-up should be coming up. I wanted to check how it went." "It went well. Her repair is holding perfectly. The cardiologist says she's completely healthy." "That's incredible. Thank you for telling me." The call should have ended there. Instead, Elena heard herself say, "Bella's been asking questions about her father. Not constantly, just the age-appropriate curiosity kids develop when they notice their family looks different." The silence stretched. When Alexander spoke, his voice was careful. "How do you want to handle that? Because I don't want to complicate your life or confuse Bella, but if she's asking questions, I don't want my absence to create a void." "I don't know," Elena admitted. "Part of me wants to protect her from the complicated truth, but another part thinks that's my damage to process, not hers." They talked for nearly an hour. Alexander asked careful questions about what Bella was like, what made her laugh, what she struggled with. Elena found herself answering honestly, describing their daughter in detail, telling him about Bella's obsession with marine biology, her fear of thunderstorms, the way she insisted on mismatched socks because matching is boring. "She sounds amazing," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is, and she deserves to know you exist. I'm still figuring out what that means practically, but I'm starting to believe keeping you completely out of her life might not be the protective choice I convinced myself it was." 3 weeks after that phone call, Elena found herself sitting on a park bench with Bella beside her, watching a man approach across the grass with measured steps. She'd called Alexander with a simple proposal. He could meet Bella briefly, in public, with no promises about future contact. Alexander sat down on the bench, maintaining space. "Hi, Bella. My name is Alexander. It's really nice to meet you." Bella studied him with frank curiosity. "You were at the hospital when my heart was broken. Mama said you helped me fix me." "I tried to help a little. Mostly the doctors did the real work. But I'm really glad they could fix your heart. Your mom tells me you're already back to dancing." "I can do 15 pirouettes now without falling," Bella announced proudly. They talked for 20 minutes about topics that mattered to Bella. Alexander listened with complete attention, never tried to claim significance. Then Bella asked with direct, 6-year-old logic, "Are you my father?" Alexander looked at Elena, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded slightly. "Yes," he said simply, "I'm your father, and meeting you today is one of the best things that's ever happened to me." "Why can't you be part of my life in all the regular ways?" Bella asked. "Because sometimes parents make mistakes," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "Really big mistakes that hurt people they care about. And sometimes those mistakes mean they don't get to have the family they want. But that doesn't change how much I care about you." "Can I see you again sometime?" Bella asked. "Maybe, if your father wants to, and if we can figure out how to do it in a way that's good for everyone." When it was time to leave, Bella waved goodbye with unself-conscious friendliness. "I'm glad I got to meet you. You seem nice." The observation made both Elena and Alexander laugh despite the emotional weight. That evening, after Bella was asleep, Elena stood at her window looking out at the city. She thought about Alexander on that bench, about the way he'd spoken to their daughter with careful tenderness, about the years of anger that had exhausted her more than they had hurt him. Elena didn't have answers, only the recognition that some wounds never fully healed, but could perhaps scar over in ways that allowed movement forward. Alexander would never undo the damage, would never fully earn forgiveness she wasn't sure she could give, but maybe he could be something smaller and more realistic, a flawed person who had learned from catastrophic mistakes and was willing to show up with no expectations. The future was uncertain, potentially painful, definitely complicated. But standing at her window with Bella sleeping peacefully, Elena allowed herself to believe that some bridges burned so completely that all you could do was learn to walk on ash. And if you were lucky, someone might meet you halfway. Together, you might build something small and careful that honored the damage while leaving space for the possibility that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't redemption or reconciliation. It was just two broken people trying to do better by a child who deserved more than their history. Taking one uncertain step at a time toward a future that would always carry the weight of the past, but might somehow make space for something resembling grace. Thank you for being part of this journey, my beautiful family. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and let's continue building this community of love and redemption together. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love you. Until next time, may you find grace in your own journey.